the geometry of strange visitors. The gun dreamed in its velvet coffin, a Beretta M1934 with a grip worn smooth as prayer beads. It remembered the forge, that furnace birth where steel became philosophy, where carbon molecules arranged themselves into the geometry of consequence. The gun had no name then, only serial numbers etched like prophecy into its slide, a mathematics of fate. But the Torresi family called it La Bocca del Silenzio, the mouth of silence. And silence, the gun learned, was the loudest language of all, the architecture of blood. In the beginning, there was Salvator. He was a man built from contradictions, hands that could snap a neck, or cradle his daughter's face with the tenderness of fog settling on Palermo rooftops. Salvator Torresi wore his mortality like an expensive suit, aware it would eventually wear thin at the elbows, but determined to make it last. His eyes were the color of espresso left too long in the cup, bitter and prophetic. The gun rested against his heartbeat, tucked in a shoulder holster that smelled of sweat and lemon cologne. It knew the rhythm of Salvator's pulse like a composer knows a symphony, the allegro of fear during meetings with the Marchetti family, the andante of contemplation as he watched his daughter Bianca chase pigeons through the piazza, where sunlight shattered into 1,000 golden coins. Bianca, 7 years old, a creature made of laughter and scraped knees, her hair a wild corona of dark curls that refused domestication. She collected things, bottle caps, feathers, the smooth stones from the beach that looked like eggs laid by the sea itself. She built towers from these treasures, architectural impossibilities that defied gravity through sheer belief. The gun watched through Salvator's coat as Bianca kissed her father goodbye each morning, standing on tiptoes to reach his stubbled cheek. It felt the reverberation of that love through leather and steel, a frequency it didn't understand, but recognized as something like holiness. "Papa," she would say, "when I grow up, will I be brave like you?" And Salvator would smile his sad, crooked smile, a geometry of hope and resignation. "You'll be braver, Piccola. Brave enough not to need to be." Aye, the algebra of vendetta. Across the city, in a room where cigarette smoke hung like the ghosts of unspoken words, Domenico Marchetti cleaned a different gun, a Colt 1911, American and arrogant, all chrome and confidence. Domenico's gun didn't dream. It was a tool, nothing more, kept pristine in a world of entropy. Domenico was 35 and looked 50. Grief had carved canyons into his face, particularly after his brother Marco had disappeared 3 months ago. Not disappeared in the way keys disappear, or hope, or youth. Disappeared in the way men disappear when vendetta becomes the governing physics of the world, violently, completely, with only echoes left behind. The Torresi family had taken Marco. This was known the way one knows winter is coming, an atmospheric pressure, a dimming of light. The specifics didn't matter. In the mathematics of mafia justice, The equation was simple: blood for blood, grief for grief, until the ledger balanced or the world ended, whichever came first. Domenico had a daughter too, Lucia, 15, with her mother's green eyes and her uncle Marco's habit of humming while she studied. She was trying to escape not the city, but the legacy. She read books about faraway places, about physics and philosophy, about worlds governed by laws that made sense. "Papa," she asked once, looking up from a book about quantum mechanics, "is it true that particles can be in two places at once until you observe them?" Domenico had stared at her, this beautiful, impossible creature who shared his blood, but not his darkness. "I don't know, Tesoro, but I know men can only be in one place, and they can only die once." Lucia had closed her book gently, understanding threading through her like cold water. "Unless we're already ghosts," she whispered. "Unless we've already died and just don't know it yet." Aye, the calculus of convergence. La Bocca del Silenzio began to sense the approaching collision, the way animals sense earthquakes, a disturbance in the fundamental frequency of things. Salvator's heartbeat had changed, acquired a staccato urgency. He cleaned the gun more often now, hands moving with the muscle memory of prayer or sin, those twin liturgies. Salvator's wife, Maria, had died 2 years ago. Cancer, that other kind of vendetta, the one without enemies to shoot or debts to settle. Just cells betraying cells, the body becoming its own assassin. Bianca barely remembered her mother's face now, except in photographs where Maria smiled from the two-dimensional past, frozen and perfect and gone. This was why Salvator had stayed in the family business when he'd promised Maria he'd leave. 1 more year, he'd told her fevered brow as she lay dying, just to secure Bianca's future, just to make sure she's protected. But in the mafia, futures don't secure, they metastasize. The gun understood this in its own wordless way. It had killed 3 men across 2 decades. Each death lived in its barrel like a sediment, like rings in a tree trunk. The first, a rival family's enforcer, shot in an alley where rats watched like an audience. The second, a traitor execution style, merciful in its swiftness. The third, a mistake, a young man who'd been in the wrong car at the wrong time, his last expression not fear, but surprise, as if death had come wearing the wrong face. That third death haunted the gun's steel dreams. Marco Marchetti, brother of Domenico, uncle of Lucia, 27 years old, with a girlfriend who taught kindergarten and plans to open a restaurant. The gun had fired that bullet into the wrong geometry. Salvator's finger on the trigger, yes, but the target had been another, a confusion of intelligence, of shadows in the dark, of the fog that rolls off the Mediterranean and makes every silhouette a ghost. IV, the topology of fate. The meeting was arranged in neutral territory, an abandoned cannery where rust had claimed the machinery like a patient kingdom. The smell of old fish and salt water pervaded everything, mixing with diesel, and the metallic tang of anticipated violence. Salvator arrived first, La Bocca del Silenzio heavy against his ribs. He'd kissed Bianca's sleeping forehead before leaving, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the flutter of her eyelids in REM sleep, where she chased better dreams than his. He'd left a letter on the kitchen table. Insurance, confession, last will and testament. All the geometries of fatherhood compressed into ink and paper. Domenico arrived as the sun set, turning the sky into a wound, purples and reds that bled into each other. His Colt was loaded, but his hands shook with something more complex than fear. Grief, yes. Rage, certainly. But also a strange relief. Vendetta was clarity. It gave purpose to pain, direction to despair. They faced each other across the cannery floor. Two men whose lives had intersected at the worst possible angle. Behind them, their families' histories stretched back generations. A fractal pattern of blood and honor, loyalty and betrayal, love and the failure of love. "You killed my brother," Domenico said. His voice echoed in the vast space, multi-blood and strange. "I did." Solvik didn't flinch. It was meant to be Katsala. The light was wrong. The information was wrong. But the bullet was real, and your brother died. This is the truth. The gun waited. It had been waiting for this moment since the muzzle flash that killed Marco, since the smell of cordite had mixed with Solvik's horror as the body fell and revealed its face, young, innocent, wrong. "You have a daughter," Domenico said. Not a question, not quite a threat, an acknowledgement of the architecture they were trapped in. "As do you." For a long moment, they stood in the silence that was neither peace nor war, but the terrible space between. The cannery creaked with wind and entropy. Somewhere, a pipe dripped water like a metronome counting down to nothing. The quantum collapse. La Bocca del Silenzio felt Solvik's hand move toward the holster. Not fast, nothing like the movies. Slow, deliberate, the way one might reach for a cigarette or a beloved's hand. The gun understood, in its mute philosophy, that this was love too. Love for Bianca, who couldn't grow up in a world where her father's mistake became her inheritance. But before steel cleared leather, a voice cut through the geometry of fate. "Stop." Lusha stepped from behind a rusted vat, her green eyes enormous in the dim light. Behind her, holding her hand with the fierce grip of terror, was Bianca. The girls had followed their fathers. Of course they had. Children always follow their parents into hell. It's written in the genetic code. That loyalty that precedes reason. "Papa," Lusha said, and her voice cracked like ice on a warming lake. "Uncle Marco wouldn't want this. He wouldn't. He used to tell me." She swallowed hard, tears streaming. "He said the only way to kill a cycle is to starve it, to not feed it what it wants." Bianca pulled away from Lusha and ran to Solvik, wrapping her small arms around his legs. She looked up at him with eyes that held the same bitter prophecy as his own. "Papa," You promised. You promised we would go see the sea together. The real sea, far away, where no one knows our names. The gun felt Solvitka's heart break. It was a physical thing, a rupture that traveled through tissue and bone, through leather and steel. The hand that had been reaching for the holster stopped, trembled, fell. Dumnaka stared at the girls, his daughter and his enemy's daughter, standing together in the ruins of their father's war. The colt in his waistband was a gravitational force, pulling him toward the inevitable. But Lasha's eyes were heavier. Lasha's tears had more mass than bullets. Marco loved you, Lasha said to her father, quieter now. But he loved life more. He told me once, the week before, he said, Lasha, if anything happens to me, don't let them make it mean something. Don't let them make my death a reason for more death. She was shaking, her voice barely above a whisper. He wanted to open a restaurant, Papa. He wanted to make people happy. VI, the fracture of certainty. In quantum mechanics, observation collapses probability into reality. The wave function falls, and particles choose where to be. Lasha had been right. Men can be in two places at once, suspended between what they were and what they might become, until the moment of observation forces them to choose. Solvik looked at Dumnaka across the divide. Two fathers, two daughters, one death that couldn't be undone, and infinite future deaths that could be. I can't give you Marco back, Solvik said finally. His voice was raw, scraped clean of everything but truth. I would if I could. I would shoot myself if it would resurrect him. But it won't. Nothing will. The only thing I can give you is this. He slowly, carefully, removed La Bacca del Salanza from its holster. The gun felt the air on its barrel, cold and strange. It had never been exposed like this, vulnerable, its purpose made visible. Solvik held it by the barrel, offering the grip to Dumnaka. One shot. Here, now. Banka will grow up without a father, but she'll grow up. You'll have your vendetta. The equation will balance. Papa, no. Banka's scream was a small animal being crushed. Lasha was crying harder now, but she said nothing. She understood the mathematics of sacrifice, even at 15, even in her grief. Dumnaka stepped forward. His hand reached out. The gun waited for the transfer, for the change of ownership, for the final geometry to complete itself. But Dumnaka's hand passed the grip and grasped Solvitka's wrist instead. My daughter called your daughter when they decided to follow us, Dumnaka said. Did you know that? They have each other's phone numbers. They met once at a festival before Marco died. They shared granita and talked about books. His grip tightened. If I kill you, I kill that too. I kill the possibility that our daughters might be something other than enemies. I kill Marco again, differently. The gun hung between them, neither taken nor refused, suspended in the terrible grace of indecision. VII, the strange geometry. What collapsed them all, the wave function of that moment, was not wisdom or forgiveness or even mercy. It was Banka, who let go of her father's legs, and walked to Dumnica with the fearless stupidity of children who don't yet understand that adults are dangerous. She looked up at him with those prophetic eyes and said, "My mama died too, from sick. Not from bullets, but dead is dead, sah. And my papa cried every night. I heard him. He didn't think I heard, but I did." She reached out and touched Dumnica's hand where it gripped Solvitka's wrist. "If you make my papa dead too, then I'll be alone. And you'll cry every night like my papa did. And Lushoa will hear you, even if you don't think she hears." Children, the gun understood, are the strangest visitors of all. They arrive in the world-trailing geometries no one can predict, speaking languages of brutal honesty that adults have forgotten. Dumnica's hand released Solvik's wrist. He stepped back, aged 1,000 years in the span of seconds. When he spoke, his voice was a wounded thing, barely alive. "I don't forgive you. I will never forgive you. Marco is gone, and that hole will never fill. I know," Solvitka said, "but I won't kill you. Not for mercy, not for forgiveness, but because." Dumnica looked at Lushoa, at Blanca, at these impossible girls who'd stumbled into the crossfire of their father's darkness. Because they deserve a different equation, a different geometry. Solvitka lowered the gun. His hand shook so badly that La Bacca del Silenzio nearly fell. But he caught it, secured it, returned it to the holster where it lived against his heart. "I'm leaving," Salvator said. "Tonight, Bianca and I have money saved. Not family money, mine. We're going north. Maybe France. Maybe Switzerland. Somewhere the past doesn't follow." He met Domnico's eyes. "I can't undo Marco, but I can stop being the kind of man who makes more Marcos." Domnico nodded slowly. "If I see you again, if our paths cross." "I know," Salvator interrupted. "The vendetta doesn't end. It only sleeps. I know. VIII, the dissolution." They left the canneries separately, fathers and daughters, carrying the weight of what hadn't happened as heavily as what had. The gun dreamed new dreams that night, not of forge birth or muzzle flash, but of the moment Bianca had touched Domnico's hand, of the geometry she'd redrawn with nothing but honesty and need. Salvator kept his promise. By dawn, he and Bianca were on a train heading north, Bianca asleep against his shoulder, her breath warm and regular, her dreams innocent of vendetta and death. The gun traveled with them, still holstered, still loaded, still dangerous, but somehow different. Not reformed, not redeemed, just other. In the luggage rack above them sat Bianca's backpack, filled with her treasures, bottle caps and feathers, and smooth stones that looked like sea eggs. And buried among them, wrapped in a piece of paper torn from Salvator's confession letter, was a photograph. Maria, smiling her two-dimensional smile, watching over her daughter from the irrevocable past. Domnico and Lucia returned home to an empty house that echoed with Marco's absence. They didn't speak about the cannery. They didn't speak about anything for a long time. But that night, Lucia came to her father's room and sat on the edge of his bed, and they cried together, not the silent, shameful crying of men trying to be strong, but the loud, messy, honest crying of people learning how to grieve without killing. "Papa," Lucia whispered into the darkness, "do you think Uncle Marco would be proud of us?" Domenico pulled his daughter close, breathing in the scent of her hair, shampoo, and youth and possibility. "I don't know, Tesoro, but I think he'd be relieved." IX, the epilogue of silence. 3 years later, in a small town in Switzerland, where snow fell like forgiveness, and the mountains stood as sentinels against the past, Bianca Torsi turned 10. She was taller now, her wildness tempered by Swiss schools and the distance from Palermo, but her eyes still held that prophecy, that old soul quality that made strangers uncomfortable. Salvator ran a small cafe, nothing fancy, but honest work. He made coffee and sandwiches and tried not to think about the life he'd left behind. La Bocca del Silenzio was hidden now, locked in a safe deposit box in a bank downtown. He hadn't touched it since they'd arrived. He told himself he kept it as insurance, as protection, as just in case. But really, he kept it as penance. A reminder that the geometry of violence is always there, waiting, sleeping, but not dead. On Bianca's birthday, a letter arrived. No return address. Italian postmark. Inside, a single photograph. Lucia, now 18, standing outside a university, her arms full of books, her smile tentative but real. On the back, in careful handwriting, she's studying physics. She says she wants to understand the laws that govern everything, because maybe then the chaos will make sense. We are alive. We are trying. D. Salvator held the photograph for a long time, standing in his small cafe as snow fell outside, and his daughter laughed with friends at a corner table, eating cake and being young, and being free of the blood that had nearly drowned them all. He didn't write back, couldn't. The geometry of their lives had diverged, and some distances, once created, are sacred. But he kept the photograph, tucked in his wallet, next to the picture of Maria. These two testimonies to survival and the cost of choosing life over death. That night, as Bianca slept in her room decorated with posters of bands and mathematicians, she'd inherited her father's gift for calculation, but turned it towards scholarship instead of sin. Salvator walked to the bank. He stood outside in the cold, breath clouding the air, and thought about the gun sleeping in its velvet box. La Bocca del Silenzio, the mouth of silence. He didn't open the box. Didn't need to. He just stood there, acknowledging its presence, acknowledging that it was part of him, the capacity for violence, for protection, for terrible love, but not letting it govern him. Then he went home to his daughter, to his small, honest life, to the strange geometry he and Domenico Marchetti had drawn that night in the cannery. A shape with no name, a mathematics of mercy that defied the old equations. X the dream of steel. In its darkness, locked away from the world, the gun dreamed. It dreamed of the forge where it was born, yes, but but also of other births, of Bianca's laughter, of Lucia's tears, of the moment when vendetta broke against the shore of two girls' courage and changed its fundamental nature. The gun would never be innocent. Steel doesn't transform that way, but it could be still. It could be silent in a new way, not the silence of death, but the silence of things that choose not to speak, not to act, not to perpetuate the old geometries. In Palermo, in the city of blood and stone, the Torresi family and the Marchetti family still existed, still operated in their parallel universes of influence and violence. But there was a gap now, a hole where two men used to be. And into that hole, slowly, other possibilities seeped. The vendetta didn't end. Vendettas never do. They're fractals, repeating patterns that echo through generations. But this one paused. It took a breath. It looked at its daughters and saw something it didn't recognize. A future that wasn't written yet. A geometry still forming, strange and unpredictable, and alive with terrifying possibility. And somewhere in Switzerland, snow continued to fall on a small cafe where a man who used to kill made sandwiches instead, and his daughter grew taller, and the gun slept its steel dreams, and the silence, that vast, complicated, breathing silence, went on, in memory of all the strange visitors who stumble into our lives and redraw our geometries, especially the small ones with their brutal honesty and their belief that the world might yet be kind. May we be brave enough to let them.